Able. 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 Anybody know he's able? Come on. He's able. Do you know he's able? Anybody know he's able? Come on, he's able. The God of heaven. Able. It is a word of assurance and confidence. When you are able, there's no question. When you are able, there is no period of trial. There's no testing. When you're able, you just perform. You just do. Able. Did God have to give it a try in your circumstance? Or did he just act and move? I've been moved by your worship this morning. I've been in your presence now. This is my second week. And I had a wonderful time. But this week I have been stirred by the young man's testimony. He shared out of a dark season in his life where he had, as much as you loved him, there was nothing you could do for him. And as much as he loved God, there was little that he could do for his own situation. But God was able, and God met him in his affliction. And God did what only God can do. I have a story. I have a testimony. Do you mind if I share it with you? As I said on last week, my name is Joseph. I'm the youngest son of Jacob. I'm the grandson of Isaac and the great-grandson of Abraham. I want to start right where I left off last week. My brothers had come up with a wicked plot to do away with me. And those of you who are standing, you may be seated. Thank you so much. My brothers had come up with a plot. They wanted me dead. I was a dreamer. I had lofty dreams and aspirations. God had deposited them into my spirit. I knew I was destined for greatness and that my destiny threatened my brothers. They threw me into a hole. Anybody ever been in a hole before? For me, it was literally a hole. It was an empty cistern. It was a vessel that had been dug out of the earth, used to hold water. There was no water in it, but certainly I was. You see, the hole I was in, I didn't choose it for myself. There are seasons in life that we go through and we find ourselves in certain holes. Some holes we dig for ourselves. Certainly, you know, you've been there before. You've dug your own hole before. But there's some holes that we are in, and they have nothing to do with us. We didn't choose them, and we didn't place ourselves in them. But due to the circumstances of life, we find ourselves afflicted in the hole. It's dark in the hole. It's lonely in the hole. I was there with no one else but my thoughts. I couldn't understand why my brothers despised me so much, but I was in the hole. There in the hole, all I knew to do was to cry out to God. I would pray my prayers, asking for my Heavenly Father to deliver me, knowing that my brothers would not come back for me, didn't know when anybody would come. If they would, I was in the hole. Have you been there before? You see, in the hole, my brothers felt that my destiny was such a threat that they could not live with me, and so they tried to exterminate me. I want to share with you something very critical here. What my brothers didn't understand was the very thing that they despised in me would be what God would use to save them. There are people who are so threatened by you that they will do everything that they can to get rid of you, but all you got to do is be faithful, because the very thing that they despise is the very thing that will deliver them. That means then that perhaps there's a quality, there's a trait about you and that people don't like and they hold it against you. That's all right. Be who you are. Because God has a way of taking your gifts that others do not care for, and before long they'll come back and they will need you. And I will talk about that later. But you see, there are people who dig holes for us because our peculiarities they find to be off-putting. My brothers didn't care for my dreams. They didn't care for my demeanor, and they certainly didn't care for my coat. They dug a hole for me. But I told you last week that though I was in the hole and there was no hope, I was not by myself. There is a way out of the hole. We can't climb out of certain holes. We can't yell and get people to, we can't get people's attention, but God is with us. My God was with me. Deliverance came. Said before, my brothers put me in a hole and they were waiting for a band of Ishmaelites. As they were approaching, my brothers literally sold me to this group of people. My brothers didn't even sell me to another Hebrew clan. My brothers sold me to Ishmaelites. Ishmaelites did not acknowledge or honor the Lord God Jehovah. But believe it or not, the Ishmaelites are also from my lineage. Because the Ishmaelites, they are descendants of Ishmael, who was the son born to Abraham outside of God's will. Do you realize, and this is a word for us, sometimes the people who we despise, God uses to deliver us. I would have thought that perhaps one of my brothers, certainly I would have been worth more to my family, and they would have kept me, they would have preserved me, they would have protected me, but they didn't. But the nation who did not honor the God that I did, they saw enough value in me that they were willing to purchase me. Don't be so critical of the people in your life, because you have no idea how God will use them. And God uses anyone and everyone. Don't think that because God uses you, or he uses you because you honor him. Don't think that God uses you because you have sung praises unto him. Even if you did not acknowledge him, God still has a way of using you for his glory. And I tell you today that I am a living witness. Had it not been for Ishmaelites purchasing me, I don't know where I would be. If you read later on in your text in the book of Psalms, the psalmist declares, if it had not been for the Lord who was on Israel's side, I will tell you, if it had not been for God on the side of Joseph, I don't know where I would be. But God orchestrates and arranges the affairs of life, and God can use anyone and everyone regardless of where they come from, what they do, what their motives are. God can still get glory. They purchased me. I was separated from my family, cut off from my father's love. My brothers despised me. I was lonely. The clan would take me to Egypt. There in Egypt was another man, a man by the name of Potiphar. Potiphar purchased me. Potiphar was no ordinary man, and Egypt was no ordinary place. It was a place like I had never seen before. It was grand. I can still remember seeing the pyramids on the landscape. I heard everyone speaking of a man named Pharaoh. In fact, I didn't even know the language that they spoke. It was a highly progressive and sophisticated society, far different from the agrarian society and culture that I had come from. I didn't see a lot of sheep herders, but I saw so much building and construction. I saw armies. I saw warfare. I saw conquest and strength. I saw swords and shields and spears. I saw majestic horses. Never had seen so much gold in all of my life, ornate jewelry. It was a splendid place. Certainly you have places like that here. I didn't know anything about this place, and I had no family, but God placed me on the mind of a man named Potiphar. Potiphar purchased me to be his slave. Doesn't get much lonelier than that. I told you my pedigree last week. My father was one of the patriarchs. We have a rich history of faithfulness to the God of heaven. And yet, I'm a slave. Where I come from, I didn't want for anything. My father took care of us. We had land. We had livestock. We had money. We had food. We had that. Now I am someone else's property. Potiphar was no ordinary Egyptian. Potiphar was captain of the guard, as of Potiphar. You see, somebody out there, you are despising your position in life today. But I assure you, it doesn't matter where life takes you. As long as God is with you, God can keep you wherever you are. I never would have chosen slavery for myself, but I still experienced God's glory and favor there. I never would have chosen hardship for myself, but God's hand was still at work in my life. Certainly, my man back here wouldn't have chosen cancer for himself, but in the midst of cancer, God was healing. He never would have chosen infection after cancer, but in the midst of infection, God was still healing. And his worship, as grand as it may have been before cancer, I promise you, worship is better now because he's gone through the hole and he's experienced the hand of God in his life. He understands. Perhaps you don't, but I'm telling you my story. I was owned by Potiphar, and yet Potiphar treated me with the utmost respect and dignity. Potiphar had everything. His house was ornately decorated. He had servants everywhere. He had the best food, the best wine, the best entertainment. His home was comfortable. And you know what Potiphar did? Potiphar said, Joseph, I want to put you in charge of all of this. Potiphar trusted me with everything that he owned. Potiphar not only trusted me, but Potiphar gave me authority in his home. I was a slave with authority. I'll say that again. I was a slave with authority. But I must tell you, I was a slave with authority, but I did not gain the authority because I worshiped Potiphar. I did not manipulate Potiphar nor my circumstances to get favor. I did not try to manipulate my circumstances to improve my plight. Yet I trusted the God of heaven. I worshiped God, And in worshiping God, I was not where I desired to be, but God made it a place of blessing anyway. You see, we don't always get to choose the dark places of our lives, but just because it's dark does not mean that we can't experience light. After all, I didn't have it so good back with my family. My brothers despised me. My father didn't know how to love me properly. I was lonely. I had food to eat, but no one to enjoy it with. But in Potiphar's house, not only did I have people around me, but I had somebody who showed and displayed his affection for me. I had the best wine, the best food, servants. I had all of that. I was comfortable, yet I was away from home and my family. But God was taking care of me. Somebody's in here this morning. You are in a season in your life, and it's not one that you would have chosen for yourself. Someone, perhaps no one in here is saying that I am a slave. But maybe perhaps you are in a position that does not match your destiny. Maybe you are carrying out and fulfilling a role that is not fulfilling you. Maybe you are in here and you are being asked to do certain things that do not match your skill set. Be faithful to God. Some of you have experienced success, and you are on a path that you never would have chosen for yourself. Life just happened that way. Perhaps you started out on one path because you had this in your horizon, this vision for your life. But due to circumstances, life took you to some different places. And now you are serving in another capacity, vastly different from your original course. And God has given you favor. God has given you authority. God has given you comfort, and you have found that this suits you better than what you would have chosen for yourself. Anybody been there before? Somebody seems to identify with my story here. I was a slave, but I had authority. I was a slave, but I had respect. I was a slave, but I was comfortable. I was a slave, and my owner trusted me with his very life. I was a slave, yet my owner wanted to take care of me. I was a slave, yet my owner treated me with dignity. I was a slave, but I was not abused. I was purchased with a price, and I was elevated. That ought to sound familiar to some of you. You were purchased with a price, and you were elevated. I'm getting way ahead of myself. I am centuries ahead, but I've read your text. And your text says that you were bought with a price, and that you are now slaves. And you are not slaves to Pharaoh. You are not slaves to Satan, but you are slaves to the Savior, slaves to righteousness. And he orders your steps, and he blesses and keeps you. Oh, don't despise me. Don't look down on me, because I'm not ashamed to say that I was a slave and I had authority. In your heritage, you too are slaves, and you have dominion on the earth. You have authority on the earth. No weapon that is formed against you shall prosper, because you belong to the God of heaven. Maybe I'm in the wrong place. I'm speaking of your heritage. I'm speaking of what you ought to be excited about, but I seem to be more excited about it than you. So I'm just going to stay there. I was a slave, and I had authority. I thought I would have gotten good company in here, because you are slaves, and you were bought, and you were purchased. My master paid for me with coins. Yours paid for you with blood. My master used money out of his excess and purchased me. Your master paid for you with his own blood. Laid down his life and didn't ask you to pay him back. I was a slave, By anyone's terms, I had made it. I was successful. Maybe on the outside you think, but you were a slave. But I wasn't an ordinary slave. I had special privilege. I had authority. I got to tell the other slaves what to do. I got to order the other slaves around. When it came time to decide what to eat, I determined what my master ate. I told my master where we would go and what we would do. All my master had to concern himself with was being healthy and keeping the Egyptian guard intact, making sure that our province was protected. Everything else was left up to me. Let me tell you something about success. I was successful. I was elevated. But others noticed. Success can be intoxicating. Success, though you feel strong, success can weaken you. You see, the rise to the top makes one vulnerable. In fact, so many people have wrestled and struggled through adversity, but very few people are able to stand in the midst of success. God was with me, but someone else was present as well. Temptation was there. Success. Had everything. Had power. Had prestige. I had material. I had comfort. I didn't want for anything. Yet there was the force of darkness. Temptation. Moses said this about me. It seems peculiar, but he said Joseph was handsome. He wasn't lying. He had it right. God had crafted me. God had made me majestic, splendid. God had given me broad shoulders, a strong jawline. God had given me symmetrical form. God had given me a straight back, a slim waist. God had given me physical features that were just shy of perfection. And everyone knew it. Everyone knew it. God had given me success and good looks. Somebody took notice of it. It was a woman. She wasn't a slave. I told you it was temptation. She wasn't a slave. None of the slaves tempted me. None of the slaves had anything to offer me. But of all people, she was Potiphar's wife. Potiphar had given me access and dominion over everything in his home. Nothing was off limits but his wife. I'll just call her Miss P. One day, Miss P. Miss P was Miss Potiphar. She had everything a woman could ever want, but it wasn't enough. Miss P had all of the food, all of the service, all of the attention that a woman could want, but it wasn't enough. Miss P had success. I told you, success exposes us. I don't know what was going on with Miss P, but there was some level of insecurity in her life. She used to whisper to me, It started real subtle. She'd blink her eyes at me a certain way. There's some females in here. You understand. You're gifted. You're gifted. You know how to. And you know men. You know our weaknesses. She started out just kind of blinking. She'd wink at me. She'd take a little longer looking into my eyes. And she'd smile. I'd hand her something and she'd make sure to touch my hand when she received it. And she'd smile. I felt different when I'd be around Miss P from when I was around the other ladies. But it wasn't enough. Because you see, I wouldn't dare mess up my good thing. Miss P could blink, wink, smile all she wanted. But Joseph was there to do work, and Master P said, you can have it all, but not her. Then one day, Miss P started saying my name different. I used to be Mr. Joseph. Then she started calling me JoJo. But it was how she said it. JoJo. Miss P had a way of saying my name. And the way she said it, I knew there was trouble. Miss P approached me and said, Joe, I need you to come into my room. And I need you to lie with me. And I'm not talking about taking a nap. Miss P was taken by me, and she felt, because I was her property, she felt that she could have me in any way that she desired. She kept at it, and I consistently refused her advances. Finally, I had to be direct with Miss P and say, Miss P, you see all this in this house? I run it. Because Master P told me that I did. Miss P, you can't have me. And I can't have you. And there are two reasons why I can't. I'm loyal to my master. And I'm faithful to my God. I don't care, Miss P, that nobody has to know. God will. Miss P, I'm sure that it would be pleasurable, but it's not worth it. I belong to someone else. I don't belong to you. And while I'm grateful that Master P placed me here, ultimately it is the God of heaven who brought me and who is keeping me. And so for me to oblige your advances and your offer, I would be losing tremendously. I felt proud of myself. Because if you had seen Miss P, perhaps you would have thought that I was delusional. How could one pass up such an offer? And I tell you, life is filled with offers. Offers come in all shapes and sizes. Offers come in all heights and weights and dimensions. Some offers shine. Some of them jingle. Some of them have a voice like velvet. Some of them shine and glisten, and they make you feel invincible, empowered. But they're offers, and they can destroy us. I refused. One day, Miss P plotted against me. Came into the house, and it was unusually quiet. In fact, there were no servants in the house. There were things that had not been attended to, but I couldn't find anyone. No one was in the house. Well, somebody was there. JoJo. Because I was obedient and faithful and loyal, it was my duty to see to the needs of my master. She was in her private chamber, and I went in against my better judgment. I went in, and the room and the space felt eerily uncomfortable. She told me to come closer. Without thinking, I moved closer. She began to rub me gently. She talked about my shoulders. She talked about my hands. She talked about how well my garments fit me. I felt her hands tighten around my arm. And she looked me in my eyes and said, "Take me now." I told her, in fact, I didn't even speak. I jumped to my feet. I left the house, not just the room. I left the house. But I told you she grabbed me. On my way out, I left with less clothes than I came in. She had grabbed my outer cloak. She held it. And all I knew was I needed to be out of that place. I read. Offers come. If they don't honor God, run. Offers come. And some of them look like they're too good to pass up. Some of them look like no one will ever know. But God will. And if they don't honor him, run. I was faithful to God. I was loyal to him. He promoted me and elevated me. But as you rise, someone else despises you. Miss P couldn't stand it. Obviously, there was something amiss between her and Master P. She despised this Hebrew slave who he trusted so much. There were times where she felt perhaps Potiphar loved me more than he did her. Somehow I knew being away from her was not going to be the end of my journey. Master P came home. As he walked up, there was a skirmish in the house. But you see, it was told to me that while I was gone, Miss P came out of her room with my coat. And she said, "This Hebrew who my husband brought into this house He tried to make sport of me. She attacked my character. There are people out there. They'll invest in you. They will make your way comfortable. They will promote you and elevate you and show you off, all the while despising you. They will give you access to the private portions of their lives. But the minute you make it clear that you stand for God and not for them, they will turn. Miss P despised me. She told all of the other servants, you see, Joseph, he's not better than you. He's certainly not better than me. He's not worthy to be in this house. And wait till Potiphar comes home. I'm going to fix him. Master P came home. He was cordial. He spoke. I spoke. Here came Miss P. She had my coat. She threw it at Potiphar's feet. She said, the Hebrew that you brought in, the one who you've loved, who you've paraded around here, made everyone else act like they were beholden to him, the one who you have spoken so highly of, the one who you said you trust your very life with, the one who you trusted me with. Well, guess what? He's not so trustworthy after all. He tried to force himself upon me. The disgust in Potiphar's eyes said it all. He was heartbroken. He was heartbroken. He called me into his presence, in the presence of all of the household servants. Everyone, he called me front and center. And he said to me, I gave you access and authority over everything and everyone in my home. I trusted my very life to you. The only thing that was not for you to touch was my wife. And you have betrayed. Therefore, you leave me no choice but to remove you from my home. And now I order that you be taken into custody immediately. And I was placed in Potiphar's prison. Back in the hole. God had given me success. I didn't want for anything. Somebody in here, you're thinking, I'm finally where I dreamed of being. Life couldn't be better. But I must tell you, life can always get worse. You see, success does not insulate or protect us from calamity. Being promoted and elevated does not shield or protect you from hardship. I had money, but it was Potiphar's money. I had access, but it was his home. I had authority, but it was given by him, and therefore he could take it at any time. But I tell you, there's still something peculiar in this. I mentioned earlier, Potiphar was a master executioner. I was accused of violating his wife. You would think that a master executioner who had a villain in his home, who he had trusted all of his possessions to, if he got word that one who he had entrusted his very life to tried to destroy or take his most prized possession, certainly master executioner would utilize his skills Why didn't Potiphar kill? I told you, the Lord was with me. And I wasn't just seeing it for myself. Potiphar saw. God was with me. Potiphar didn't even know Jehovah like I knew him. But he saw Jehovah in my life. Do you realize that even your enemies see in you? They see God. That tells me one thing. Potiphar really did not believe Miss P. He could have killed me, but he didn't. He spared my life. And I know why. It wasn't Potiphar. My life was not in the hands of Potiphar. My life was in the hands of God. I was faithful unto God. And God became faithful unto me. I was preserved. But I was back in the hole. I had success, but it was fleeting. Now I was despised yet again. In prison. But Moses said something else. The Lord was with Joseph. I was in prison, but they gave me keys. I was a prisoner, but I had authority. I was a prisoner, but I had the respect of the guards. I was a prisoner, yet I had position and prominence. Again, I'm sharing out of my own story because somebody, life has taken you up, life has taken you down, life has locked you away, people have plotted to destroy you, people are trying to take your life, people are trying to steal your joy, people are trying to damage your testimony, people are trying to discredit you, but there is a God in heaven who will honor and keep those who trust and believe in him. Now, it might not look the way you want it to look, but God can give you favor. It might not be where you want to be, but as long as you are with God, there is no better place to be. And therefore, God can take you from the pit to the palace and back to the pit again, but every step of the way, God will be there. And somebody's here today, and your life is filled with darkness. But I know one who is able, and you sang about it this morning. There is one who is able to do exceedingly and abundantly above more than you could ever ask or imagine. That God kept me and preserved me. Miss P, she didn't have nothing on God. She could take my clothes and she could take my testimony, but God will preserve my spirit. She can discredit me all she wants, but God will elevate and promote me yet again. They may talk about you, and they may run your name down, and they may attack your character, and they may come up with fictitious charges, but if you stay true to God, God will honor you, and God will keep you. Because Miss P wasn't in prison with me, but I was a prisoner, but I had keys, because God was with me. She didn't know who she was messing with. She thought that I had crossed her, but she crossed God. And therefore, let that be lessons learned for all of us. That God always honors righteousness. And righteousness won't always put you in good company. But righteousness will always prevail. Righteousness can be expensive. Righteousness can cost you relationships. Righteousness can cost you fame. Righteousness can cost you advancement. But I'd much rather be behind in good conscience than be ahead constantly looking over my shoulder. God was watching. God was protecting. And I'll stop right there. And next week I'll come back and share with you how this story ends. God bless you.